So we introduced this theme called multiply. And so when people hear the word multiply, we're conditioned to think quickly, something that multiplies quickly. But the definition that we've chosen to go with was the definition that says this: to perform the process of multiplication. Multiplication doesn't happen overnight, but we would prefer that it happens right now. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how multiplication is directly related to the seeds that we sow. That multiplication, good or bad, happens over time. And multiplication is the harvest of the seeds that we've sown or will sow. So wherever your life is right now, it's a direct result of the seeds that you've sown somewhere in the past. Those things are coming into harvest, right? And so if you want to change your harvest, you want to change your life, we have to change the seeds that we're sowing. And so we talked about how God gives us things and how we shouldn't consume all of it, that he gives us seed to sow. We read that. We spent a lot of time in Corinthians chapter 9, where Paul was saying that God would provide seed for the sower and bread for food. And we just talked about how sometimes when we get something, instead of realizing that part of it is to sow seed back into the ground, we just eat it all. But Paul made this differentiation between the two, that he gives us stuff to eat, he'll take care of our needs, but he also gives us seed that we're supposed to be sowing back into the kingdom. And so I believe that if we embrace these principles that will revolutionize our lives, that if we begin to understand that success or multiplication doesn't just happen overnight, that it's a process, that it will change us, right? We'll stop just wanting it right now, but we'll understand that the process is getting us where we're supposed to be. To learn to embrace that process and to know that if we bypass the process, then we bypass a lot of our value. We've hit this quote every week, but it's just it's so applicable to what we're talking about. It's in a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it says this: it's so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. Sowing seeds little by little, and sometimes we don't see those results, right? So we've been hitting this mostly from the positive perspective, that doing the right things a little bit at a time will eventually make us successful. But we've alluded to this a few times and haven't really jumped on the other side of the coin yet. But just as small improvements over time and on a daily basis will eventually have a huge payoff, small compromises on a daily basis will also have a huge payoff. It just won't be the desire. It won't be the payoff that we desire. You know what I mean? Because I know I always make fun of fast food, but fried chicken is the go-to Sunday meal for the Robinsons. And if you were here last week, you know Katie and I are on a fast food fast, so we're not hitting that. But if I ate fried chicken today, I probably wouldn't be any more unhealthy than I already am. But a continued lifestyle and regularity of eating poorly, right? Poorly sows seeds into bad health and things like that. If repeated long enough, it certainly have long-term effects. Let's look again at the words of Paul in Galatians chapter 6. And I really want to focus, we're going to focus on verse 8. But verse 7 says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Verse 8, beginning of that says, whoever sows to please their flesh from the flesh will reap destruction. And then in verse 9 he says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time, watch these words, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. But that applies either way. You're sowing good seeds, don't give up, you'll reap a harvest. If you continue to sow bad seeds, you will also reap a harvest. What kind of harvest do we want to reap? What kind of harvest do we reap? It all depends on the seeds that we sow. And I know we spent a lot of time in the weeks previous talking about sowing seeds and all of that, but I just really want to stay here at this moment and talk about how if we sow to the flesh, we will reap destruction. Small improvements make a huge difference, but small compromises will destroy us. There's an old story and science experiment that goes along with this about a frog. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about it, done it yourself. I don't know. Some of you probably haven't tried this, but you heard the story. You put a frog in boiling water, he'll jump out. Anybody ever heard this before? Let's show hands. But if you put a frog in the water and slowly, incrementally turn up the heat of the water, that he will just sit there. Eventually, he'll die. You guys seen this science experiment? Well, I got a quick YouTube video. We'll watch this and then we'll jump back in here.
A frog is a cold-blooded animal, and humans are warm-blooded, so our body burns energy or perspires to maintain the same 98.6 degrees. The cold-blooded frog's body temperature goes up and down with the temperature of its surroundings. Although frogs love water, when I hold it over this pot of boiling water, this frog is very uncomfortable and climbs to get away from it. Now, the water in this pot is room temperature, 69.4 degrees, so he's comfortable when I put him in. If I turn the burner on low flame, his body temperature will adjust and slowly he will heat up with the water. The water temperature has risen to 80 degrees and the frog is the same temperature and still comfortable. If I turn up the burner slowly again, he won't notice because he'll continue to change to be the same as his surroundings. When we started, I held the frog over the first pot of boiling water. He was uncomfortable and he tried to get away from the heat. But now, because we're raising the temperature slowly, he doesn't recognize the danger he's in. He just keeps going along with the changes in his surroundings. Eventually, we can turn up the burner to a deadly boil. He will just keep trying to adjust with it. By the time he realizes it's killing him, it's too late. He won't notice in time because he just keeps changing himself to go along with the changes in his surroundings.
You guys understand the point, right? A little bit at a time doesn't seem to make much of a difference. But just as the frog will sit there as the water gets hotter and hotter and ultimately die, so compromise will ultimately kill us. When I was a kid, one of my favorite Bible heroes was Samson. Anybody else love Samson when you were growing up? I loved it when the teacher in Sunday school or children's church, kids' church, told stories of Samson. When he had superhuman strength, he tore a lion apart with his bare hands. He fought off entire armies by himself and came out victorious. He had amazing hair, something I haven't had for a long time. Samson had it all. But spoiler alert, if you fast forward to the end of his life, he falls in love with the wrong woman. She deceives him, cuts off his hair. He loses his supernatural strength, and he's captured by his enemies. And when we look at all that he had, sometimes we look at these guys because we have the hindsight of the entire story, and we're going, dude, how could you be so dumb? How could you do this? How could you not realize that you were in hot water? It's because one bad decision at a time, the water got a little bit hotter and it was virtually unnoticeable until everything that he had was lost. Right. So today I want to look at the life of Samson and some of the choices he made. It starts in Judges chapter 13. If you're following along with the Bible or on your app, whatever, follow along. Otherwise, it'll be on the screen. We're not going to read the whole thing for time's sake. I would encourage you, as you prepare for e-groups this week, just to read these chapters, Judges 13 through 16, and just get a picture of the entire life of Samson. We're just going to hit some highlights. First of all, an angel of the Lord came to the wife of a man named Manoah. So she's barren and unable to have children. And so we read this in Judges chapter 13, verse 3. It says, the angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you're going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now, it's amazing to me, this is a side note, it's amazing to me how many times that God births something through someone who wasn't even supposed to be able to get pregnant. Over and over in Scripture, we see that God causes someone who's barren to birth someone of significance. I know it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, and it could really be an entire message, but if you're here today and you're feeling like a nobody, or you're feeling like nothing ever good comes from you, and people talk about destiny and dreams and following that, you're like, dude, I don't have any of that. God is able to do what he did for those barren ladies in the Old Testament and New Testament. He's able to do that through you today. Let's go on to verse 4. He says, now see to it that you drink no wine or fermented drink, and that you not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hand of the Philistines. How many of you have ever heard of a Nazirite before? Right, so there's a vow that they would make. And I'm going to read that just quickly, just for context. In Numbers chapter we read what it meant to be a Nazirite. In verse 3, it says, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink, and must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain under the Nazirite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. During the entire period of the Nazirite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. So this is what it meant to be a Nazirite. These are the rules that Samson are to follow all of his life. So to illustrate some of this, we're going to jump around again in some of these passages of Scripture, and I want to encourage you to read through these on your own. But just jump to Judges chapter 14. Samson finds a lady that he likes her and he wants to marry her. And his parents object because she's a Philistine, which is the enemies of God. And so they didn't know that God was actually in the middle of this whole thing, because God was wanting to use this relationship to bring destruction to the Philistines. And so one day they're going to meet this young lady, Samson, his mom, and his dad. And that's where we pick up this story in Judges chapter 14, beginning in verse 5. It says that Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. And as they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Now look, this whole thing is a little strange, to be honest. He's walking with his mom and dad, but at some point he apparently goes off by himself. The verses don't specifically say where or when he left, but it says that he was attacked by a lion, and then his parents didn't know. He was attacked by a lion. He rips the lion apart with his bare hands. And then it said in verse 6 that he neither told his father nor his mother what he had done. In 1 Peter, he says this, to be alert and sober-minded, because the enemy of the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. I don't think it's coincidence that Samson was attacked at this place and at this time. I mean, look at what's happening. First of all, he separated himself from his covering, his parents who are his covering. And the moment that you and I separate ourselves and come out from underneath our spiritual covering is the moment that we become vulnerable to attack. Oftentimes, this is the first step in our compromised journey, where we just want to step out from those that are spiritual authority over top of us. We step out from underneath that, and then we lose that blessing, and it opens us up to attack. We weren't meant to do life alone. Again, I know I keep referencing the e-groups, but this is another reason why e-groups are so important. We all need a spiritual covering. And number 2, did you notice where he is? He's in a vineyard. What do they make in vineyards? Grapes, wines. It doesn't say that he drank, but he was there. Why would someone who had taken a vow not to drink wine, grape juice, eat grapes, raisins, or even the seeds be hanging out in a vineyard? Remember the Nazirite vow? We just read that. That's why I added that, because that's the context. He wasn't even supposed to have a seed of a grape, but yet here he is in the middle of a vineyard. Why? In the midst of the scene, a lion attacks him. But this is exactly how we live our lives sometimes. We want to get as close to the edge as possible. I'm not going to drink. I just want to hang out in the vineyard. I just want to smell the grapes. Maybe we don't do anything wrong, but sometimes we just find ourselves in places that we shouldn't be. We're alone and isolated, and that's when the enemy attacks us. Listen, I know this message is probably going to be a little heavier than what we're used to. You know, we're usually 2 claps and a Ric Flair and all kinds of insanity going on and laughing and things like that. And so in one way, I apologize for the heaviness of it, but I want you to embrace the seriousness of what we're talking about, because just like when we sow, as I've already said, positive seeds, growth happens. When we sow compromise, destruction happens. The other thing that's interesting to me is that he didn't tell his parents about it, which we already alluded to in verse 6. This is, but he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Listen to what I'm saying. Secrecy with the struggle will destroy your life. If you have a compromise in your life, an area that you're compromising, and you have no one to talk to about it, and you keep it a secret, it'll destroy you. I mean, when we were kids, we couldn't keep a secret. Now that we're adults, we live with our secrets. This is why the book of James says that we're to confess our sins one to another so that we can be healed. Confession brings healing. Confession brings freedom. Judges 14, verse 8. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. And in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. And he scooped out the honey with his hands and he ate as he went along. And when he rejoined his parents, he gave them some and they too ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Could there really be a better image of what sin really is? Honey inside of a dead carcass. Something sweet and desirable in the midst of death and decay. Because that's what sin is. It looks good, it tastes good, it feels good, but always, listen to me, 100% of the time, it's wrapped in death and decay, and it will destroy you. Notice in verse 9, again, he withholds information. Scooped out the honey, he ate some, gave it to his parents, and at the bottom of it said he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Maybe you're saying, he's a grown man, who cares if he told him where it came from? Listen, here's the problem. Secrecy is a problem. As part of his vow, he's not even to touch anything that's dead. And now he's eating honey from a dead lion's carcass. He's breaking his vow, and he doesn't want anyone to know about it, so he doesn't tell them where it comes from. In a book called Toxic Soul, written by a couple of brothers, James and Jeremy Isaacs, they say this, that rule number one of temptation is if you're afraid to talk about it, that's confirmation you have to talk about it with someone. If you got something going on in your life, you're like, I got too much to lose. I feel like I can't deal with this. I don't want to tell anybody. That's a sign you have to, or it's going to destroy you. That's right. I love the old quote that says that things that grow in the dark die in the light. Bring it to light so it can die. Samson continues his life. He does some amazing things. And again, we're jumping around. This is kind of a flyover today. Let's jump over and look at one of the most infamous passages about him, which is Judges chapter 16, Samson and Delilah. Again, this is a flyover. We can't spend a lot of time on the whole thing. It really probably deserves weeks of its own series. This is one day Samson went to Gaza where he saw a prostitute and he went in to spend the night with her. Okay, well, it doesn't take rocket science to know that's a bad idea. Again, this is incremental compromise. He's walking in a vineyard. Did he drink or eat anything? Don't know. Doesn't say he did, but he was there. Eating out of a lion's carcass. Now he's spending the night with a prostitute. Verse 2, the people of Gaza were told Samson is here, so they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. And they made no move during the night, saying, at dawn we will kill him. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. And then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate together with the two posts, and he tore them loose, bar it on. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. The pace of this story is very fast. There's only a few chapters they actually represent more than 20 years of life. So it's moving very fast. It feels like it's just, okay, he had this wife, and then we didn't read all about that, but the first lady, and then, there's all this craziness on the line, and it just feels like it's just one big moving thing. But we're talking about 20 plus years that are going on here. What I want to do is I want to back up to verse 4, and I just want to point some things out about Samson and Delilah as we move forward to talking about incremental compromise. In verse 4, it says, sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. And the rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so that we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. I love the language used in verse 5 because this is exactly what we're talking about. They said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength. Everybody know what it means to lure? Right? It's to tempt or to entice. It's a decoy, usually an artificial bait used in fishing or trapping. I got an illustration. Most of you know that I'm not an outdoorsman, so I brought my son's Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. But this is how compromise works, right? This is the enemy, and he's gonna cast this lure out. It's not even real. Uh-oh, we might have got hung up. You see? Look at this. We got it. So he's got this lure, and we're just going towards it, and he's just slowly reeling us in. He's reeling us in. And if that bait doesn't work, maybe he'll change the bait. Maybe your struggle isn't sexual like Samson's. Maybe it's financial. Maybe you'd rather, again, I don't want this to sound harsh, but maybe your problem would be you'd be more apt to cheat on your taxes than to cheat on your wife. So he's going to change that bait, throw it over there. Let me see if he'll take that one. And he just slowly reels us in. So you cheat a little bit, no big deal. So I make one inappropriate comment to somebody I shouldn't. Maybe it's no big deal. But then these feelings come alive in my heart. And I'm like, whoa, now I'm feeling something for somebody who's not my wife, and it's just slowly reeling me in. Reels you in until you don't have it anymore. And if that doesn't work, maybe I'll try something else. Let me try this bait. He just reels us in slowly. It's not even real. It's not even real. It's just what's on the end is a lure. It's meant to look real, but it's artificial. Yeah. Come on. And so we give up what's real to chase the artificial, and it destroys our life. Right. Before you know it, we're hooked, right? Hook, line, and sinker. He's just throwing these things out. Let me throw some lust out. Let me see if I can get them to think some impure thoughts about this person. I don't say anything to them. Maybe it's not something I shouldn't have done. It's just a thought that I had when she walked by, when he walked by, like, whoa, they're looking good today. And then you meditate on that and you're like, pretty soon you're getting ready on your way to work and you're thinking, I wonder if he's going to notice what I have on today. He liked that one outfit. I have this outfit. It kind of looks similar. Comparison. Let's see if I can get them to doubt themselves because they're comparing themselves to everybody else. Let me throw that one out. Comparison. Let me just reel that in. I'm not as good as this person. I'm not as good as that person. I don't look as good. I don't have as much stuff. My house is not as nice. My car is not as nice. Worry. Let me see if I can get them to be anxious and worry about stuff and throw that out and just reel it in slowly. Oh, I'm so anxious and I'm so worried and woe is me. And what if Trump doesn't get 4 more years? Oh my God, the whole country's going to go to crap. I mean, it's just all this stuff and we're just all this, you know what I mean? God's on the throne all the time. Amen. Obama, Hillary, Trump, it doesn't matter. God is the king. Amen. He's the king. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about it. The economy just goes straight down. I'm not going to say who cares because it affects us in a real way. But what I'm saying is God is on the throne no matter what. Amen. No matter what. I can't allow myself to get sucked into the worry of, I don't know what's going to happen in my future. Things happen to us. We lose income. Income fluctuates. It goes up and down. And when we're just, I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I going to pay for this? God is on the throne all the time. Offense. Let me see if I can get them to be offended just because somebody disagrees with them. Let me reel that one in a little bit. Oh, you don't agree with my opinion? Just reel it in. Constantly throw in the lure. Listen to me. Don't take the bait. Don't allow the bait to slowly lure you to your demise. Satan has one goal, and that's to kill, to steal, and to destroy. He doesn't play fair, and he will use any means necessary to destroy your life. Any means necessary. Verse 6, it says, So Delilah said to Samson, Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Samson answered her, and he said, If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I will become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. And with men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. And then Delilah said to Samson, You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now and tell me how you can be tied. 3 times this process happens. It's repeated. She begs to know the secret. He lies to her. She has the enemy hiding in the room, waiting to capture him. And 3 times he awakes from sleep only to defeat the enemy. And then in verse 15 it says this. Then she said to him, How can you say I love you when you won't even confide in me? This is the 3rd time that you've made a fool of me, and you haven't told me the secret of your great strength. Dude, get out of this relationship. Get out. With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Do you see the progression? Even in her, it's day after day. It's little by little by little. We only have reference of 3 times before this 4th one that ultimately gets him, that he told her something. But day by day by day, remember this is a 20-year span. I don't know how long he was with Delilah, but day by day by day. Compromise, day by day, little by little, week by week. And then all of a sudden, we're in this situation that we can't get out of. And it's about to destroy us. So he told her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I've been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. And if my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man. And when Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more because he has told me everything. And so the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands, and after putting him to sleep on her lap, and there's a lot of symbolism here. We don't have time to jump into all of it. Putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. And then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Incremental compromise. He thinks it makes no difference. He wakes up to do what he's always done, the way that he's always done it. But the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They set him to grinding grain in the prison. Finally, the Philistines have captured their enemy. Samson has lived a life full of little compromise, and now they've caught up to him. I want to start to close this by going out to verse 4, going back to verse 4. Remember earlier we talked about Samson being in the vineyard, right? We talked about the secrecy. We talked about how it doesn't specifically say that he took a drink or ate any of the grapes. We just know that he was in a vineyard. Now in verse 4 of 16, backing up again before all of that took place, it says, sometime later he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. I want to point out some very interesting things here. She's from the valley of Sorek. Do you know what the valley of Sorek means? The word Sorek means this, choice vines and choice grapes. Part of my vow is to stay away from not from the vineyard, but stay away from anything from the vine. She's from the valley of choice grapes, the valley of choice wine. The name Delilah means this. The root word is to hang low, or be low. Delilah was the low-hanging fruit on the vine. Choosing Delilah was the easy choice because it was the low-hanging fruit. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy. Don't always take the easy route. Don't take the easy way out. The path of least resistance isn't always the best path. When I drive, sometimes I got hit a few years ago. It was down on 441 in front of Popeyes. I was turning left. I was going north on 441, turning left, and I didn't see this guy coming. And when I didn't have a green arrow. I had the green yield, right? And so I turned. And this guy was green light. He had a green light in the right of way, and he hit me and just spun me around. You know, it was nothing happened. I mean, destroyed my car, but nobody got hurt. It was no big deal, but scared the crap out of me. I know I said crap twice today. I'm sorry. I don't usually say that. It scared me bad. You know, I'm in the middle of the intersection. I see this guy just, and I remember just yelling. I was like, ah! He just hit me and spinning around like this. Ever since that time, I sometimes will drive around something so I don't have to cross in front of traffic. I try to take the path of least resistance. So if I can instead of crossing traffic, sometimes I'll take a right turn and go down, wait for a red light, make a U-turn and come back because it's the path of least resistance. It seems like the safe thing to do. But in our lives, and that's what we do sometimes, is we look for the path of least resistance. But when it comes to compromise, sometimes compromise is the easiest path. It gets us from point A to point B quicker. But when we compromise, that's not the best path to take, even though it may have been easier. don't always default to the path of least resistance. Don't default to that. Sometimes we've got to go through the hard things. We've got to make the hard decisions. And just because it's low-hanging fruit, just because here's Delilah and she's beautiful and she has all the things that I need and all the things that I want and all the things that I perceive that I need inside of my heart, I'm not going to pick that fruit because that's not the best direction for me. When we bypass the process, as we've talked about already, we bypass the blessing. Samson may have never taken a physical drink from the vineyard, but the drink that he took in this relationship brought him to his knees. Samson's drink of choice was compromise. And it all finally catches up to him, and he doesn't even know. The bottom of that verse, he says, I'll go out and shake myself free, but he did, as before, and shake myself free, but he did not know that the Lord had left him. And this is where a lot of us live our lives. Incremental compromise, a little bit here, a little bit there. We think that it doesn't matter much. Multiplication doesn't show preferential treatment. You can sow good seeds or you can sow bad seeds, and either way, eventually you'll reap a harvest of one or the other. Verse 22 starts to talk about the comeback of Samson. But the hair on his head began to grow back after it had been shaved. I know there's lots of messages that you could preach on this, and it could get real exciting, talking about the comeback of Samson. His hair grows back. He begins to get his strength back. And one day, as the Philistines were worshiping in their temple, they asked them to bring Samson out so that he could entertain them. Here's this great champion of Israel. Bring him out and entertain us because now we have captured him. And they chained him to the center pillars of the temple. He placed his hands on the pillars, one on one side and one on the other. And Samson prayed that God would strengthen him one last time, that he could get revenge and that he would die with his enemies. And that's exactly what happened. He pushed on the pillars and the temple came down. And it says that he destroyed more Philistines in his death than he had in his life. Valiant, right? Exciting. Yeah, he sacrificed his life. He gave it up. And he did more damage to the kingdom of the enemy in his death than his life. To me, this is one of the saddest stories in the Bible. It's a complete waste and loss of potential through compromise. What are you capable of? What am I capable of? What is this church capable of if we don't compromise, if we don't shortcut? I don't want to be standing on the other side going, oh God, I screwed up my whole life. Just strengthen me one more time. Just one more time, God. One more time. That's not how I want to live my life. I don't want to wake up tomorrow and be like, I think God is with me. I'm just going to do what I've always done, only to find out that He's gone. He's gone. Lifted His presence, lifted His hand, lifted His anointing because of incremental compromise. One of the saddest stories in the Bible, a man called by God, gifted by God, anointed by God, chosen to rescue the children of Israel from their enemy, full of potential, and he wasted it all on incremental compromise. Most of us get our news from Google, Facebook, or some sort of online source, but I want you to imagine for a moment that a news story broke about you. And you wake up tomorrow and your name is on the front page of the Ocala Star banner. What would it say? What would your headline be? Local pastor has affair with church member. Local church member arrested for soliciting an underage minor. Local mother arrested for DUI. Church member arrested for tax fraud. Maybe these seem like extreme examples, but when we drink the choice, when our drink of choice is incremental compromise, there are no limits to the amount of destruction that can be caused. What is your compromise of choice? What are you dabbling in that needs to be confessed? Compromise and secrecy will destroy your life. One of my mentors, Jeannie Mayo, spent 2 years in a program with her and just learning some stuff. She says this, there's a quote, I love it. It says, the enemy doesn't care how long it takes to get you, just as long as you continue to move slowly in his direction through your quiet compromises. He's committed. He's committed for the long haul. He's committed for the long haul. You do good all the way up, and then your last, he got you. He's committed. How committed are you? How committed am I to do the right thing, to avoid being caught by the lure that he's throwing out and trying to reel in.